Okay, how's everybody today? Pretty good? I see that looks like the fall weather has finally arrived. Um, I think I told you before that I always wonder, it seems like it's getting warmer, staying warmer later and later in the year. One of my friends from Taiwan that's living in Germany said that when I told her about the temperature in Taichung, she said, wow, I remember November was always cold when I was younger, but now it stays warmer all the way to almost mid-November. So anyhow, I was happy because I don't know if any of you went to the COMPASS Food and Music Festival on November 4th and 5th, but the weather was perfect. I mean, it was absolutely perfect. It was, about 30 degrees, high of 30 degrees, and the low was maybe 26, 27 in the evening. So to me, it was perfect. In fact, it was almost a little bit hot on both days. Around noontime, I was thinking, wow, this is like summertime. But anyhow, I'm just happy it did not rain and that the weather was very clear. Okay, so today I thought we would start with this article because this is big news. Xi Jinping and President Biden are finally meeting after a long time. And it's a lot of people want to see if anything happens. To be very honest, my hopes are not high for anything to change, but I do think that it's good that they meet. I think meeting is good. Okay, so the headline here says, Biden says China has real problems ahead of key APEC summit with Xi. And what is a summit? Yeah, if you have a meeting between two high-level leaders, like a high-level meeting, we would call it a summit. This word, I guess we could use it for business. We could say a business summit. Yeah, we could say that, but often it's used more often for a government summit between two government leaders. But yeah, we could also say a business summit. Yeah, I've climbed Yushan Summit 3 or 4 times. So. Yeah, so the summit also means the top of a mountain, right? So you can say I reached the summit of Snow Mountain or Yushan. Of course, summit can also be a 动词. So if you reach the summit, you can say I summited. So that becomes a verb, okay? So let's say that word together, summit. Summit. Okay, so APEC, as you know, is that organization, Asia Pacific Economic, whatever, I don't know what it means. But yeah, it's an organization. Okay, so I'll read this. It says, U.S. President Joe Biden on Tuesday said that China has real problems, speaking at a fundraiser in San Francisco on the eve of an eagerly awaited meeting in the U.S. city with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, of course, this meeting, it says eagerly awaited. So, if you await, you say I'm waiting for something, but awaited means something that you are waiting for, okay? You can say the much awaited movie finally came out, or the eagerly awaited restaurant opened. So it's something, if you're awaiting something, it means you are waiting for. So awaited, eagerly awaited, is known for meeting. So why don't we say it together, eagerly awaited. Eagerly awaited. Okay, so, and you know what a fundraiser is, right? I think if you look at that word, you know what it means. Fund means what? Money, yeah, and raising money, right? So politicians always try to raise money, right? I mean, this is something that you need money to pay the bills, to pay your staff, to pay for your campaign, to pay for guangdao, whatever. So you often have fundraisers, okay? Yeah, usually it's a meeting or dinner. I know in America, I don't know about Taiwan, but in America there are a lot of fundraising dinners or fundraisers where you invite a bunch of people to come and have dinner, and usually the dinner is very expensive because that money is helping to raise, you're helping that, by eating at that dinner, you're helping raise money. Now, of course, during the fundraiser, you might donate more money to that candidate or that politician. So we say a fundraiser or a fundraiser dinner. It can be a shimonsu. So why don't we say together, fundraiser. Fundraiser. Okay, so let's read this together. U.S. President Joe Biden on Tuesday said that China has real problems. Real problems. Speaking at a fundraiser in San Francisco on the eve of an eagerly awaited meeting, let's say this last part, eagerly awaited meeting in the U.S. city with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Okay, so it says here, the leaders of the world's two largest economies are to meet on the sidelines of the APEC summit in California for their first encounter in a year as trade tensions, sanctions, and the question of Taiwan have fueled quarrels between Washington and Beijing. Okay, so sidelines. What is it? Where do we get the word sideline from originally? Where does it come from? Yeah, sports. So if you play, like I used to play a lot of soccer or football, it's neutral, right? And of course, there's always a sideline. And if you stand on the sideline, it means that usually you're waiting to go in the game or you're watching the game. So when you say on the sidelines of something here, of course, this is not a game. This is a meeting, a summit. So it means on the sidelines means on the side of. It's not part of the summit, but it's on the side of it. So it's like if you're standing on the sideline, you're not in the game, but you're on the side of the game. Now, of course, both of them are here for the APEC summit, but on the sidelines, they're going to have this meeting, this other meeting, okay? So why don't we say together, sidelines? Sidelines. Now, this word is interesting because we can use it as a verb. We can say he was sidelined by his boss, okay? So let's say you're in a company and you think you're doing quite well and you're working hard, and then your boss says, you know what, I'm going to take you out of this project. I want you to go clean the toilet. No, I don't know. I want you to do something else, but basically they take you out of the job. They take you out of that project. You say, I was sidelined by him, means that my responsibility was taken away from me, or my position, or my job, or my whatever it was. I was taken out of the game, basically. It's kind of like if you're in a game, like you're playing basketball or football or whatever, and the coach says, "Okay, I want you to come out." And you're like, "What?" Okay. So it's funny because I'm a soccer coach. I coach a team here, and there are times when I tell a player, I'm like, "Okay, it's time for you to come out," and they're like, "Me? You want me to come out?" I'm like, "Yeah, I want you to come out," and they're or they just ignore me, right? So, but yeah, I'm taking them out of the game. So sometimes it's not. If you say you were sidelined, usually it's a negative thing. It's not a positive thing. Okay, so sidelines, and then it says here APEC Summit in California for their first encounter. Now, of course, encounter means when you meet something, right? You can encounter another person, but you can also encounter situations, right? I encountered difficulty. I encountered disaster. I encountered many problems. So you can encounter things when you face it, you meet it, okay? So what? Close encounters of the third kind, yeah. There's a meaning behind that. I'm trying to remember what it is, but obviously it refers to aliens, right? So I believe, I'm trying to remember what the reference is. There's some reference there, like that idea of a third kind is maybe like alien or something like that. But yeah, I don't know. But yeah, if you may remember, some of you, in the 1970s, Steven Spielberg came out. One of his early movies was called Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which is about these aliens coming to Earth. Not E.T., a different alien. Yeah. Okay, so why don't we say together, encounter. Encounter. Okay, so this is their first encounter in a year as trade tensions. Of course, we know China and the U.S. have many tensions for trade. Sanctions, you know what sanctions mean, right? Like right now, the U.S. has many sanctions on technology sales to China, okay? Yeah, especially semiconductors and things like that. And the question of Taiwan have fueled. We've talked about this word again. Fuel means like when you put gas in your motorcycle or your car, that's fuel, right? So fuel here becomes a 动词. Fuel means to power, to drive, to create. Okay? So why don't we say together, fuel. Fuel. Right. So if you add more fuel, someone says, don't add more fuel. He's adding more fuel to the fire. Let's say someone's having an argument and someone makes the argument worse by adding more comments. You say he's just adding fuel to the fire, making the fire bigger. Okay, making the argument bigger. Okay. Yeah, but rub it in is almost like if you make your point and then you just make that person feel worse. You know, let's say someone failed. They made a mistake and you're like, yeah, you really shouldn't have done that. Oh yeah, that was kind of stupid. Or you really, and you keep talking about it and you say that's to rub. Rub means to rub it in. Okay, it means to make them feel bad over even worse. But fuel the fire just means to make the argument or whatever the situation is even worse. Okay, so these are fueled quarrels. Now you know what a quarrel is, right? Argument. Basically, it's an argument, a disagreement, a quarrel. Now, sometimes when we say quarrel, it has the idea of being a smaller argument. Like you can say, siblings, brothers and sisters, and often quarrel with each other over little things. But obviously, this is a more serious quarrel. This is a bigger quarrel. So why don't we say together, quarrel. Quarrel. Okay. The what? Spat. A lover's spat. It's just like a small disagreement between lovers. Yeah, people who have a romantic attachment. Spat, S-P-A-T, is usually a small disagreement, not a big disagreement. Usually when we think of the word spat, it has the idea of a small and temporary, it's going to pass. It's not going to last for a very long time. We say a temporary, short-term disagreement, okay? So, yeah. Okay, so let's read this together. The leaders of the world's two largest economies are to meet on the sidelines of the APEC summit in California for their first encounter in a year as trade tensions, sanctions, and the question of Taiwan have fueled quarrels between Washington and Beijing. Okay, so it says here, Biden, who, like Xi, arrived in San Francisco on Tuesday, has characterized the meeting as a chance to right ties that have floundered over the past 2 years. Okay, there's some good words here. Now, characterize. We have a longer word, and I think you remember this word, characterization, right? It's almost like a description. How would you characterize that person? And basically it means how would you describe that person? Define. Now, what are the specific definition or characteristics of that person? For example, you could say, what are the leading characteristics of a good manager? And someone might say, well, he cares for his employees. He's always there with them. There's many ideas, but basically we would say, how would you define? What are the specific aspects or characteristics of a good manager? So when we say he characterized the meeting, it means he described the meeting. He's saying this is what the meeting is about or what it's like. Okay, so it's a good word. Why don't we say together, characterized. Characterized. Okay, now I think you remember, I'll just go ahead and write it down because it's a long word. But we say characteristic or characteristics. Okay, so why don't we say it together? Characteristics. Characteristics. Right, and that's a means, right? What are the characteristics of a good student or a nice restaurant or whatever you want to describe? Okay, so he characterized the meeting as a chance to right ties. Now, this is an interesting verb because ties, of course, is another word for relationships, right? A relationship. What are the ties between us, or what are the ties between Taiwan and China like right now? So we say ties, but right here becomes a verb. Okay. Now, this word gets used very frequently in one situation, and when we say we want to write something, does anyone know how we use that word a lot? To make it correct, right, but there's actually another way we use this word. For a boat or any kind of water vessel, if the boat flips over, it capsizes, we say we want to right the boat. It means we turn the boat so it's up again. It's on the right side. So, I don't know if any of you have ever used a canoe or a kayak, you paddle. And often if you're in rough water, it might turn over, it might capsize or fall on, go on its side. And then you have to right the boat. You have to get it up again and get the water out. So anyhow, these relationships, if they're not right, if they're not correct, and we want to right them, it means we want to get them up again or get them in the proper way of position again. Okay, so the chance to right ties that have floundered. Okay, now this word flounder is also a word that I often think about water. Okay, so if you are sinking, or whether it's a ship or a person, and you're starting to sink and you're trying to stay above the water, but you're still going down, we call that you're floundering. Okay, so sometimes you look at a ship or a boat and it's starting to fill up with water and it's starting to go down, right? It's slowly going down. We say the ship is floundering. Okay, so floundering is this idea of it's kind of sinking. It's going down. It's not doing well. Okay, so let's say together, floundered. Floundered. Okay, there's actually a type of fish called a flounder, and it's flat. It's very flat, and it only has one side, right? It sits on the bottom of the ocean, and its eyes are on the top, and it's very flat. And it's also very delicious. I remember when I was in university, and the cafeteria at the university, they would announce the menu every day, right? Today, here's the menu. And whenever I saw flounder on the menu, I was like, okay, good, this is great. Yeah, it's got that white, very flavorful. It has a lot of flavor. Yeah, it's very good. I like it with butter. So yeah, it's a good thing. Okay, so let's read this together. Biden, who, like Xi, arrived in San Francisco on Tuesday, has characterized the meeting as a chance to right ties that have floundered over the past few years. Okay, and that's a photo caption. So it says here, President Xi is another example of how re-establishing American leadership in the world is taking hold. They've got real problems, he told a fundraising event late on Tuesday, hours ahead of his talks with Xi. He did not elaborate. Okay, so basically here we're talking about establishing, but establishing again, okay, is taking hold. Now, if something is taking hold, it means it is starting to become firm or stronger, right? Trying to think of another good example of something taking hold. Yeah, I don't know if you say, just basically it's solidifying, it's getting solid, it's getting firm, okay? It's getting stronger. Something is taking hold, okay? So here's this fundraising. Now here, of course, fundraising becomes a shimonsu. Now this interesting, he says he did not elaborate. What does that mean? Yeah, if you elaborate on something, it means you give more information, right? If your friend says to you, say, I am really angry today, and then that's it. They don't say anything more. And you're like, okay, why? They did not elaborate. But if you said, please elaborate, right? If someone tells you something, you want to know more, you can say, please elaborate, which means, please tell me more. What's going on? And they say, oh, well, I got in a car accident, and then I lost my keys. And, they give you a lot more information. So remember, this word, we talked about this before, is there's a shinonsu, right? Which is pronounced different. It's elaborate, right? You can say there were elaborate decorations for Christmas, okay? Which usually means very fancy, very detailed, lots of, there's lots of, fancy is maybe another word, elaborate, okay? But here it becomes a dongs, and then we say elaborate, okay? So you notice that last part is pronounced a little bit different. The dongs has a more of an A sound, a longer A sound. So let's say this word here, the verb, elaborate. Elaborate. Okay, and then the shinonsu, elaborate. Elaborate. Yeah, it's a small difference, but it's there. Okay, so yeah. So basically, he didn't say what big problems they got. Okay. The what? You mean they don't elaborate on their ideas or their plans? That's what you mean? Right. So you're saying that they don't really reveal their ideas. Yeah, I mean, sometimes. It depends on the person, I think. Some people they do a pretty good job and others don't. Okay, so let's read this together. President Xi is another example of how re-establishing, let's say it again, re-establishing American leadership in the world is taking hold. They've got real problems. He told a fundraising event, let's say this again, fundraising event, late on Tuesday, hours ahead of his talks with Xi. He did not elaborate. Okay. Yeah. I think so, yeah. And actually many commentators say, you notice recently Xi Jinping they're making nice with Australia, now they're making nice with the United States. So a lot of people say that China, their economy is really down, and so they need help, right? They need investment. But I was thinking about this, and I read this article earlier today, and I was on my way over here, and I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, let's be honest, I think for business investors, international business investors, and global leaders, they're not going to change their minds on China for one reason, and that's Xi Jinping. As long as he's running the show, I don't think people trust him anymore. I think he's burned up his goodwill. Goodwill is something you have, like it's like a currency, right? If people like you, right, and they trust you, we say you have lots of goodwill. Goodwill. That's one word. Goodwill. But if you burn up your goodwill, means like you burn through it, and then nobody believes you anymore. They don't trust you anymore, right? They think, okay, today you're very nice to me, but what about tomorrow, right? I don't trust you. There's a very funny expression. I'm sure you've heard this expression before. It's a very good expression. And we use this for relationships, but we say, I'm sure you've seen this. Have you seen this before? Once bitten, twice shy. This is scared. Obviously, shy can mean like you're very shy. You know that word. But if you say once bitten, twice shy, this is a very common English expression. It means that if you bite me, and basically you harm me, I will not trust you again. Or it'll take me a long, long time to trust you. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay. So basically it's that idea. Once something happens to you, you don't trust them anymore. So I think for many countries, they were they've been bitten by China, and now they're twice shy, basically. Australia is a good example, right? I think the problem is Australia, yeah, sure, they want to sell their stuff to China, but I think they don't trust China anymore. They think, okay, today we start selling our stuff to China, but what tomorrow if Xi Jinping gets unhappy with me again because I didn't do what they want me to, and they cut trade again? So we can't rely on China. So today, if you look around the world, there's a very common expression, and you'll see this in the news over and over and over again. It's a very funny verb, 动词, that we never saw before. It's like a new word, okay? But they call it de-risking. I see this word in the news all the time now. And this is not a word that, literally, if you asked me this word 3 years ago, I would not know what this word is. But you know what risk is, right? 风险, right? So if you de-risk, basically it means, what are you doing? You are reducing your risk, okay? Right. Not decoupling. Okay, so that's a good point. There's another word that's very similar, but people avoid this word. Decoupling, okay? Now, if you decouple, this is actually a more common word. This is a regular word, a normal word. To couple means to connect, right? It also means to connect with something as a 动词. So if you decouple, it means you disconnect. Disconnect, okay? So basically, decouple means to disconnect. So a lot of governments they will say to you, including America, they'll say, no, we are not decoupling with China, or we're not disconnecting with China. We still have a connection with it, but we are de-risking, which means we want to reduce our risk or our exposure to China, because if all our manufacturing is in China, or we rely on China too much, we have too much risk. So we're going to reduce that risk. So that means a lot of companies, instead of manufacturing everything in China, they move a lot of operations to Vietnam or India or some other country, or even back to the United States or Mexico. I know that we said before, Mexico now imports, the U.S. imports more from Mexico than they do from China. So I think that, these are very common words. If you read the news recently, you'll see these words a lot in the news. So why don't we say them together? De-risking, de-risking, decoupling, decoupling, disconnect, disconnect. Once bitten, twice shy. Once bitten, twice shy. Yeah. Okay. So that's a good expression to remember. I'll give this expression often gets used with personal relationships, right? Let's say you ask somebody you trust somebody for something, and they betray you, right? And then you think, okay, forget it, fine, I'm not going to trust, or they betray you more than once, right? And then you think, okay, that's it, I'm not going to trust you again. It doesn't matter what you say, what you do, I don't trust you. So that's that expression, once bitten, twice shy. Okay, so earlier the president told reporters at the White House before heading to San Francisco that here's the word, I didn't even notice it. Here's the word, that the U.S. is not trying to decouple from China. What we're trying to do is to change the relationship for the better. Okay. So if you mean change the relationship for the better, means we're trying to improve it. We're trying to make it better. Okay? So I didn't even notice that he used the word there, but that's the word, yeah. Okay, so everyone says, no, we're not trying to decouple. Okay. I think so, yeah, of course. But the thing with nowadays, I think in the past, whenever the U.S. president would meet with China, I think people in Taiwan and everywhere else were very worried that he was going to give too much to China. But I think nowadays in the U.S., things have changed completely. There's so much pressure. The opposite is true. It's like everyone has to be tough against China politically. The Democrats, the Republicans, everybody, because there's this feeling of anti-China feeling in the U.S. right now. Okay, so let's read this. Earlier, the president told reporters at the White House before heading to San Francisco that the U.S. is not trying to decouple from China. What we're trying to do is change the relationship for the better. For the better. Okay. Okay. Asked what he hoped to achieve at the meeting, he said he wanted to get back on a normal course of corresponding, being able to pick up the phone and talk to one another if there's a crisis, being able to make sure our military still have contact with one another. So, yeah. So basically, corresponding means, what is that? What does that mean? Yeah, it means to communicate, you know. Writing letters, we say writing letters is a kind of correspondence, okay, with the C-E, C-O-R-R-E-S-P-O-N-D-E-N-C-E, correspondence. Okay. I have not in a while. I write emails, but I should write letters. I think writing letters is cool, right? If you use someone's hand, if you see somebody's handwriting, it's different. It's much more personal, right? Oh yeah, I wrote many beautiful letters. Yeah. I still marvel at how long some of my letters used to be, right? After high school, I remember writing letters to my high school girlfriend that were like 12 pages long, right? I mean, I'm still amazed at that, right? I'm like, how could I write so long, you know? But yeah, it was that's bad. I don't think I do that anymore. I don't even write emails that are 12 pages long. I think she was impressed, but yeah, we didn't stay together too long. You know how it is. High school relationships don't usually last. Well, they do sometimes. But I have a handful of friends that actually married their high school boyfriend or girlfriends. But I would say that's very much the exception and not the rule. You know, usually most high school relationships break up. Okay. What does that mean? Oh, I don't know if we have any. We just say the common word we use is we say to express that we say high school sweetheart. You know, sweetheart. Yeah. So someone says, "Oh, they married their high school sweetheart." That's the term we often use. You know the term sweetheart, right? Okay, it's one word, but the term high school sweetheart is a very common expression. It's one, yeah. So if someone says, "Oh, they married their high school sweetheart," for some reason we don't say college. Well, I guess we could say university or college sweetheart, but usually we say high school sweetheart. Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, it's that general idea. In America, yeah, prom, P-R-O-M. Prom is like a high school dance, a party held by the school. It's sponsored by the school, and it's a big deal. There's prom every year, and there's special proms, and yeah, anyhow, it's a big deal. Yeah. Okay, so anyhow, he asked what he hoped to achieve in the meeting. He said he wanted to get back to normal course of corresponding. So if you correspond with somebody, you can still use this word. This is a very common word. You can say we correspond by email, or we correspond by text message, or we correspond by writing letters. Okay, so anyhow that you communicate with each other, usually in kind of like letter writing. So, you know, if you send a text message, I guess you could say that's still corresponding. I mean, you're still sending a message. Doesn't matter if it's long or short. So why don't we say it one more time? Corresponding. Corresponding. I'll actually add something here. if you ever, sometimes when you watch the news and they talk about a记者, 特派员 or whatever, they sometimes use the word correspondent, D-E-N-T, a correspondent. So if you say here's a foreign correspondent for CNN or for New York Times, basically it means he's like a special reporter, 记者, for that news agency. And so, it's that idea of writing letters, of writing messages. You're a correspondent. You write things for a newspaper. So, yeah. And so it's a good word. It's something we use. So he wants to get back to basically a normal communication with China. Being able to pick up the phone and talk to one another if there's a crisis, and being able to make sure our militaries have contact with one another. So I think, the U.S. attitude you can see in the last year or 6 months has been, let's just talk. Let's just keep meeting. Let's just send, we want to send our officials over there, because I feel like for a long time China was angry, so they just don't want to talk. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to have connections. And the U.S. is like, come on, let's just talk. Come on. We'll talk, right? And it'll be okay. So I think talking is better than, of course, fighting. So let's read this together. Asked what he hoped to achieve at the meeting. He said he wanted to get back on a normal course of corresponding. Being able to pick up the phone and talk to one another if there's a crisis. Being able to make sure our military still have contact with one another. Okay. Yeah. Both sides. Yeah. Because this has been something America's been very concerned about, is usually you have a military hotline, 热线, right? So if there's a problem, suddenly there's a problem between China and the U.S., they can pick up the phone and say, hey, what's going on? Or what, let's talk about this, or let's stop this, And there hasn't been, for a while, there has not been any direct hotline, 热线, between the U.S. and China. So they want to, I know the U.S. really wants this back again. Okay, so it says here, however, Biden also said that the U.S. is wary of investing in China due to Beijing's business practices. I'm not going to continue to sustain the support for positions where, if we want to invest in China, we have to turn over all our trade secrets, he said. Okay, so this is going back to this idea, once bitten, twice shy, right? So he says the U.S. is wary. Now, wary is, when I think of that, I think of this, right? If you are wary of something, what does that mean? Very cautious, very careful about something, but usually because something happened, right? You can say, I'm wary of investing in that company because I think their planning is not very good. Or I'm wary of taking that trip because I think it's dangerous, okay? So if you're wary of something, it means you're very cautious, or maybe a little bit worried or afraid of something, okay? So why don't we say together, wary. Okay, so the U.S. is wary of investing in China. Why? Because of Beijing's business practices, basically the way they do business. Okay, I'm not going to continue to sustain. Sustain means, what would be another word? Actually, these two words are very similar. To sustain means to continue, to keep doing something, to continue supporting something. Okay, so to sustain the support means to maintain. You know the word maintain? Sustain, maintain. These two words are kind of similar to each other. So to sustain support, to maintain support, I think are kind of similar idea. Okay, so anyhow, to sustain the support for positions, that means basically our position, our approach, right, or the way we do something, where if we want to invest in China, we have to turn over all our trade secrets. And that was kind of the old way of doing business in China. It's like, okay, you want to invest? Okay, give us your trade secrets, or give us your technology secrets, or we'll just basically steal them. So basically, this is what he's saying. We cannot. It's not business as usual. Okay. In America, we say business as usual means we do business the same way we did business before. But if we say no, it's not business as usual, it means no, this has to change. Okay. And it doesn't have to be business either, right? You can talk about relationships or anything else. You could say, right now, it's not, it is business as usual or not business as usual. Okay, so let's read this together. However, Biden also said that the U.S. is wary of investing in China due to Beijing's business practices. I'm not going to continue to sustain the support for positions where, if we want to invest in China, we have to turn over all our trade secrets. He said. Okay. Actually, I want to say, I kind of assume you know this, but practice, it usually means like li and qi, right? But business practice, of course, is the way you do something, right? Now, often we say best business practices. It means good business practices, or if you're the way you do something. So it's not lianxi, it's the way you do something. Now, practice gets used in many different ways, right? For example, you can talk about the medical practice or the legal practice. Basically, again, that doesn't mean lianxi. It means the way you do something. Your business. You can say he works for a legal practice or a medical practice. It's like a job, a business, a way of doing something. So this word actually has more than actually 2 or 3 different ways we use the word practice, which, of course, usually means to practice. Like I'm going to practice my homework, or actually practice playing the piano or something like that. Yeah, well, I think so. But I think that, I think honesty is the best practice. I think being direct is the best practice. But yeah, I think that's a great way of saying it. Is honesty the best practice, or is directness the best practice? It means the way you do something. Okay, so yeah, business practices. That's a word. Okay, so it could mean kind of like routine, but it means something else. It means more like the method, the way, the 做法, the way of doing something. So if you talk about business practices, it means how you do business. What's your way of doing business? Like you said, honesty or dishonesty, right? You can talk about bad business practices, right? If you always cheat people or lie or steal, that's bad. Usually people think that's very bad business practice. Yeah. Okay, so it says here, ahead of the meeting between the two leaders, I'll read this. China and the U.S. yesterday pledged to work more closely together to fight global warming, declaring the climate crisis one of the greatest challenges of our time. It says the announcement further fueled, there's that word again, fueled hopes that the two nations could mend relations. Okay, mend means what? Fix. What do we often mend? Shoes, clothing, right? That word mend often gets used for like ifu or something you wear, right? I need to mend a hole in my shoe. I need to, it's very funny. I do not sew. I should sew. my long time ago, when I was in junior high school, my mother tried to teach me how to sew, and I was like, I'm 无聊, right? I don't want to learn. But now I wish I would have been a better student, because it's funny, like, I'm very 不好意思, but even if a button, comes off, I put my shirt aside, and then I wait till my sister comes to visit Taiwan. I'm like, By the way, could you fix this for me? Oh yeah, no problem. Or I remember I actually took some clothing back to America and gave it to my mother. Like, could you fix this for me? I I know I should learn. I'm just lazy. But yeah, it's a terrible thing. It's a basic skill I should learn. But it's like I'm like, oh, maybe. I still remember once I was even in my office. This was in the emergency. I was in my office and I was wearing a suit, xizhuang, and a button came off right before a meeting. And I was like, what do I do? And then fortunately, my office staff, I'm like, you know how to sew? Can you do this? And they're like, yeah, sure. They sewed it back on. No, woman. Yeah. I don't know if most men in Taiwan know how to sew. Hopefully they do, but I don't know about Americans. But yeah, it is a basic skill. I think I'm a firm believer, and I'm not the best example, but I believe that there are certain basic skills that parents should teach their children, right? Like how to change your tire on your car, right? Or how to sew. Or how to do or how to basically cook, do some simple cooking. I think that's a good basic skill. I think I told you long time ago, this happened like 5 years ago or so. One night I came out of my office at COMPASS magazine. It was late, and there was a car on the side of the road, and there was about 3 or 4 ladies there, and their tire was flat. And I didn't even think about it. I jumped on my motorcycle and I started going. And then I got down the road and I thought, I should help them. So I turned around and came back, and I said, "You need help with your tire?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure." So I went and got the jack, and I jacked up the car, and I replaced the spare tire, and I felt very good about myself. So yeah, but that's a basic skill. Okay, so that's it says here, ahead of the meeting they pledge. Now, of course, we said pledge means what? To promise, to swear, to pledge. If you pledge something, it means you're promising something. To work more closely to fight, of course, global warming. Okay, so climate crisis, everybody talks about that. Okay, so let's read this, and then I think we can go to a different story. Ahead of the meeting between the two leaders, China and the U.S. yesterday pledged to work more closely together to fight global warming, declaring the climate crisis one of the greatest challenges of our time. The announcement further fueled hopes. Let's say that last 3 words. Further fueled hopes that the two nations could mend relations. Okay, so again, here we have that word fueled. So if you fuel somebody's hopes, it means you raise their hopes. You give it more strength. You strengthen somebody's hopes. Okay, so yeah. I think that we're just talking about climate change. Okay, any questions about this? I think it's pretty serious. It's ongoing, right? It keeps going against government agencies, against companies, against businesses. Basically, yeah, online, especially online espionage. Although recently there's been a lot of cases with people too, right? Not just hacking or hacker. There's also been spies. It's interesting because in Taiwan people often they talk about, there's a lot of news about spies and stuff like that. But it's not just Taiwan. I mean, it's other countries too. So it's not just a Taiwanese problem. I think there's problems in many countries with spies. And of course, China's not the only country that spies. The U.S. definitely spies too. So yeah. Okay, let's go back to another one here. So this was the other big story that we talked about last time, and it's still going on. It's still a big story, and there's still lots of people that feel very strongly about this. and that's the whole situation in Israel, with Israel and Gaza. Now, the attention recently has been focused on hospitals, right? Because, there's a lot of fighting going on around hospitals. This is a very, very, very sensitive issue, right? Of course, you don't normally attack a hospital, but everything that seems to appearance is that, unfortunately, the Hamas is using hospitals as a shield for themselves, right? It makes it very difficult because these poor people are stuck in the middle, right? People who are in the hospital. So anyhow, it says Biden's. Oops, sorry. Okay. So it says here, Israel says troops found weapons in key Gaza hospital. Okay, key of course means important. Okay. Israeli troops yesterday entered Gaza's biggest hospital and were searching its rooms and basement, witnesses said, culminating a days-long siege that caused global alarm over the fate of thousands of civilians trapped inside. Okay, so you know what a basement is, right? We talked about last time we talked about a cellar, right? Remember we used the word C-E-L-L-A-R? A cellar is usually for, it's like an underground room. Often we talk about a wine cellar. People store their puhao down in the cellar, right? Usually when I think of a cellar, I think of a smaller room. Like a house has a small, often in America, sometimes houses will have cellars. But we can say basement too. I know this building has a big parking basement, or basement parking lot. Okay, so why don't we say together basement. Basement. Okay, so they were searching its rooms and basement. Witnesses said, culminating a days-long siege. Now, here this word days-long becomes a 形容词, right? Because it lasted for days. So we say days-long. And what is a siege? Yeah, if you basically surround something and you don't let anyone go in or go out, basically you put it under a siege. Another way that we use sometimes for a country, not a hospital or building or even a city, is we say what? There's another word. If we talk about a whole country, we use the word blockade. Yes, blockade. Okay, so you could say they blockaded the country. Okay, they cut it off. Now, if you put something under siege, it could be a city, it could be a building, it could be an area that's under siege. And we say, siege, of course, is a means, but we often use the word under siege. It is under siege, or they are under siege. And actually, there's a simpler word that if you want to express this, if you say someone is under siege, you can say they are besieged. Okay? That means they are under siege. You can say and this can be a 形容词 too. We could say the besieged city or the besieged hospital. Okay? So anything that's under siege is besieged. Okay? So that can be a 动词 or a 形容词. Okay. So why don't we say it together? Siege, siege, besieged, besieged, under siege, under siege. Now here it says this searching, and they entered the hospital, culminating a days-long siege. This word culminating is a very good word. Yeah, basically it means concluding, finishing, or the kind of you said the highlight, but basically it means the conclusion, the ultimate conclusion, the ultimate ending or final. You know what I'm trying to say? Okay, for example, you could say this award, if someone gets an award like 得奖, right? You can say this award culminated many years of work. Okay, after many years of work, the culmination, and we can use this as a 名词, P-I-O-N at the end, culmination of years of work was an award. Okay, or this success, this success of our company culminated many years of work. Okay, maybe your company wants to 上市, right? List on the stock market. You can say the stock listing was the culmination of years of growth, okay, or effort. Yeah, or their quarrel culminated in a divorce, right? You know, the Hun or something like that. Yeah, so basically it concluded, it ended in this, okay? So yeah, it's kind of the idea of this, that many things happen and then this is the final ending or the result or the conclusion of something, okay? So it's a good word. So why don't we say together, culminating. Culminating. And then as a noun, 名词, culmination. Culmination. So often we say the culmination of something. Or this word too, we can also say culminating in, okay? If something happened and then we say culminating in this, and that's the result. Culminating in an award, culminating in a failure, culminating in whatever happened at the end. Okay, so culminating a days-long siege that caused global alarm. Of course, people were alarmed, very worried, over the fate of thousands of civilians. Now, we've talked about this word many times. Civilian is basically someone who is not a soldier, not in the military. We say civilian. Let's say it again, civilian. Civilian. Right. So, you know, we use this as a 形容词 too, right? If you are a soldier, and then I see this a lot, you know, they're in the military, they wear a uniform, right? But then maybe when you have your vacation, you wear civilian clothing. That means you wear your normal clothes. I think we're all wearing civilian clothing. Okay, so the fate, of course, means what is going to happen to them. What's the ending? You know, fate usually is命运, right? But the fate means what is going to happen. What is the fate of that person? What is the fate? We're not talking about 命运 here, but we're talking about what's going to happen to them. What is the, you know, sometimes you watch a movie and you see something happen to somebody and say, what is their fate? What's going to happen to them? Okay. Kind of. Destiny is... It's a good question. They're very similar. But you could also say... You could say we were fated to be together. You could say that. But I think here's the thing. Fate is something that people would say we don't have any control over, whereas destiny is something that was meant to be. It's something that should happen. It was meant to be. It's the way it should be. But fate is more like it could be good or bad, it just. I mean, of course, destiny can also be good or bad. So yeah, it's a very similar idea, but maybe slightly different. Yeah. So anyhow, you know the word. Everyone know the word destiny. D-E-S-T-I-N-Y. Destiny. So if you, like you said, if you want to impress somebody, you like somebody, you say, well, we are destined to be together, or you are my destiny. You know, that sounds kind of romantic right there. Okay, so let's read this together. Israeli troops yesterday entered Gaza's biggest hospital and were searching its rooms and basement. Witnesses said, culminating a days-long siege that caused global alarm over the fate of thousands of civilians trapped inside. Right, okay. We didn't read this word yet. Let's just say this too. Blockade. Blockade. Yeah. I was just thinking when you said, talking about destiny. There's a great 1980s movie called Back to the Future, right? Have you seen this movie? Back to the Future? What's the Chinese name? Yeah. There's a very funny moment in the movie where, he's trying to convince his future father to to talk to his mother, and he's writing down, he's telling him what to say to her. And he says, you should tell her you are my destiny, right? But what does his father say? He actually says, you are my density. You know, now dense, you know what dense means? Dense means very thick, you know, or very, very thick. But if you say someone is dense, it means they're stupid too, right? Okay? If you say he's really dense, it means maybe it means his skull is too dense, nothing can go inside, or it's too thick or heavy. Yeah, so he's trying to impress the skull, and he says, you are my density, right? Which is kind of funny. But yeah, that's a very funny moment in the movie. Okay, why don't we say together, dense, dense, density, density. Okay, it says here, Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City has become the main target of the ground operation by Israeli forces, who say Hamas fighters have the beating heart of their operations in a headquarters in tunnels beneath it, which Hamas denies. Okay, so this is the hospital. It's the target of this ground operation. Ground operation means, of course, it's using soldiers and tanks. It doesn't mean it's not in the air, it's not in the sea. You say the Hamas fighters have the beating heart of their operations. Now, beating heart would mean, if you say this is the beating heart of their operation, what does that mean? Yeah, the most important part, the central part, right? The beating heart of this project, or the beating heart of that company. You know, if you say, what is the beating heart of that company is their CEO, right? Maybe that guy, he's super smart and he has all the great ideas and he's a good leader. You say, he is the beating heart of that company. He's the soul, the heart. We could also say the soul, right? But anything that's really essential, very important, okay? So no, hit jackpot means to win something, right? To get something. But if you say someone is the heart of something or the beating heart of something, it means they are very absolutely important to that operation or that company or that whatever. Okay. So everybody understand that? Beating heart? Of course, beating heart means it's pumping, right? It's moving. Your heart beats, right? It beats. Hopefully it beats. Okay, so they have the beating heart of their operation in the headquarters in tunnels. Now, you know, a tunnel is like I know in the mountain we say what, 山洞, right? 洞, 隧道, or whatever you call it. There's many kinds of tunnels. There's a road tunnel. There's a, Okay, so why don't we say together, tunnels. Tunnels. Okay, let's read this then. Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City has become the main target of the ground operation by Israeli forces, who say Hamas fighters have the beating heart of their operations in a headquarters in tunnels beneath it, which Hamas denies. Okay, so here it says Israel said its troops uncovered unspecified weapons and terror infrastructure inside the hospital compound after killing fighters in a clash outside. Now, of course, troops is another word for soldiers, okay? And it's always plural. It's never singular. I guess some troops, in a very, very rare instance, we might use it as a singular, but usually we don't say one troop. You can't say, like, we say one soldier, but we don't say one troop. We also talk about troops, which is a plural. It's more than one. Okay, so its troops uncovered unspecified, means they didn't say what it was, but unspecified weapons from cheek, and terror infrastructure. Now, I know we've learned this word before, but what is infrastructure? Yeah, it's like the framework. I often say infrastructure is like the ET, right? The hardware of something. So, when we talk about a country, we often mention the infrastructure, right? So if we say, what is the infrastructure in Taichung, or what kind of infrastructure does Taichung have? We say, well, of course it has lots of roads, it has some high-speed roads, it has an airport, it has a gangkou, a harbor. That's all part of the infrastructure. It's like the hardware of a company or a city or a country, but we say the infrastructure. So, the government is always talking about infrastructure projects, right, to build something that's new to help the country or city or whatever. Okay, so let's say it together. Infrastructure. Infrastructure. So, of course, when they say terror infrastructure, it means that they built something inside, or the tunnels are part of this network or this inti that's used by the terrorists. Yeah. Okay. Inside the hospital compound. Now, we've said this before, but a compound is usually like a complex. It's like a cluster of buildings. In the old days, a compound often had a wall around it, right? It was enclosed in a wall. But I think a compound doesn't have to have a wall around it. It just could be an area. And we often use the word complex. 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 You can say a building complex or compound. Okay, so the hospital compound, after killing fighters in a clash of course means fight outside. Okay? Any questions about this? Okay, let's read this then. Israel said its troops uncovered unspecified weapons. Let's say it again. Unspecified weapons and terror infrastructure. One more time. Terror infrastructure inside the hospital compound. After killing fighters in a clash outside. Okay, that's a photo. Okay, it says, once inside, they said there had been no fighting and no friction with civilians, patients, or staff. The military released photographs of a soldier standing beside cardboard boxes marked medical supplies and baby food in English at a location Reuters verified was inside the grounds. Okay, so there's a good word here. I don't know if we've ever talked about this word. Friction. What is friction? Yeah, but in a scientific way, what does friction mean? It's the when we say friction between, okay, if something, I'll tell you what the opposite of friction is. If something is very slippery, right? If you're walking and there's water or ice in the road and you slip, that's because there's no friction, right? But friction is normal. Like if your shoes have a nice surface on them, then there will be more friction and you won't slip, right? That's why you should, or I'll give you another example. The tires on your motorcycle, your car, right? They have treads in them, right? They have lines in them. Why? Because that creates more friction with the road. If there's water, if it's raining or something, and then you hit your brakes, your car won't keep sliding. It'll create friction. So friction is that tension between the surface, right? So things don't slide. But if you say there is friction with somebody else, that means what? There is tension. Yeah. The word tension, we've talked about that word before. There's some sort of, I don't want to say conflict, but there's something uncomfortable or stressful between you. So there's tension. You can say right now there's tension between me and my colleagues, or there's friction between me and my colleagues. Now that might come because of a disagreement, or maybe there's something wrong, or people are not happy, and then we say there is friction. Or you could say there's friction inside my family right now, right? People are not getting along or they're unhappy. Okay, so this word is a very common word, friction. So why don't we say that together? Friction. Friction. And that other word, tension. Tension. Okay, so they said once they got inside the hospital, there's been no fighting and no friction with civilians, patients, and staff. Okay, So, and then they show this picture of a soldier standing with a cardboard box. You know what cardboard is, right? That's a cardboard box, right? It's made out of paper, basically, like thicker. So we say cardboard. Cardboard box is marked, and on the box it was marked medical supplies and baby food. Now this location, the picture was verified. And if you verify something, what does that mean? It means you confirm that it's true, right? So if people can say anything. They can say, yeah, I did this, or I went to this, but you have to verify that. Right? Can you prove it? Yeah. So yeah, I guess you're right. Proving, you can say they proved, or they provided proof. They offered, they gave proof, or they established it was true, that it was inside the grounds of the hospital. Reuters, of course, is a news agency. Okay, so let's read this. Once inside, they said there had been no fighting and no friction with civilians, patients, or staff. The military released photographs of a soldier standing beside cardboard boxes marked medical supplies and baby food in English. At a location Reuters verified was inside the grounds. Okay, so it says here, other photos showed Israeli troops in tactical formation walking past makeshift tents and mattresses. Attention has been focused on the fate of hundreds of patients trapped inside without power to operate basic medical equipment and thousands of displaced civilians who sought refuge there. Okay, so first of all, the photo showed Israeli soldiers in tactical formation. Now, formation is a way that you organize yourself, right? So a formation could be usually it's like an organized structure, but people or airplanes or ships, right? So tactical formations, sometimes when soldiers move, they move in a special formation for military purposes, maybe to protect themselves, right? Sometimes when I go near Qingquangang, I see airplanes flying in formation. Maybe they're 1, 2, 3, like a V. Sometimes we say a V formation, or sometimes in the ocean you see ships in formation. They're in a special line. So formation can be anything. Like in Taiwan when we have a parade, and you see like the high school and they have a marching band, right? They're playing music and they're walking in a special formation. They're walking in these lines. So here it's a tactical formation, walking past makeshift tents. Now, what's the word makeshift mean? Yeah, it's something that's not. It's not actually designed that way. You just kind of put it. You make it yourself. You create it yourself. So a makeshift tent would not be a tent that you buy at Econom or something like that, right? This would be a tent that you just kind of made or created yourself. Maybe you find some sticks and you put them up, and you find some cloth or canvas and you put it over and you create your own tent. So we say that's a makeshift tent. So, sometimes you talk about a makeshift house. It's not like a normal house that they come and construct. It's a house that you find a piece of stuff there and something over there, and you kind of just put it together yourself. So we say makeshift tents, and of course mattresses is what goes on your bed, right? A mattress. Okay. So why don't we say that word together? Makeshift. Makeshift. Okay. So it says attention has been focused on the fate. Here's that word again. Fate of hundreds of patients trapped inside without electricity, right? Without power, to operate basic medical equipment. Of course, if you don't have electricity, there's a lot of machines and medical equipment you can't operate. And thousands of displaced civilians. Now, what does displaced mean? Yeah, it means that you're not in your normal place, right? You've been pushed out of somewhere, like, refugees. We talk about refugees a lot, right? So refugees are displaced people, basically. They're people, they had to leave their homes or their houses or their country, and now they've been displaced. They've been pushed out or forced to leave their normal place, wherever they are. They're displaced, they're out. Okay, so let's say together, displaced. Displaced. Okay, so there are thousands of displaced civilians who sought, of course, sought is the word for seek, S-E-E-K, sought shelter there. They're looking for shelter. What's another good word for shelter? Refuge, right? R-E-F-U-G-E, refuge. You're looking for refuge. You're looking for shelter. Okay, somewhere. Okay, so let's read this together. Other photos showed Israeli troops. Let's say it again. Israeli troops in tactical formation, walking past makeshift tents. Again, makeshift tents and mattresses. Okay, attention has been focused on the fate of hundreds of patients trapped inside without power to operate basic medical equipment, and thousands of displaced civilians. Let's say it again, displaced civilians who had sought refuge there. Oh, yeah, sorry, I said refuge. Again, who had sought shelter there. Okay, yeah. So it says here, Gaza officials say that many patients, including 3 newborn babies, had died in recent days, as a result of Israel's encirclement of the facility. Before entering the hospital, our forces were confronted by explosive devices and terrorist squads. Fighting ensued in which terrorists were killed, the Israeli Defense Forces said. Okay, so newborn, of course, that I think you all know that. Newborn baby. Newborn can be a 形容词 or it can be a 名词. You can simply say a newborn, right? Two of my good friends just had they have a newborn baby. It's their first baby, a son. He's half French, half Taiwanese. So it's funny because the French guy, he told me the name is it's a really nice name, Etienne. Etienne. It's a French boy's name. Nice name. I like the name. So anyhow, they just had a newborn baby. Okay. So why don't we say together, newborn. Newborn. Okay, so 3 newborn babies had died in recent days as a result of Israel's encirclement. Now that's a good word. I think you can guess what that word means. Yeah, basically if you encircle something, it means you surround it. So it's basically another word for surrounding something. They encircled it doesn't have to be a siege, okay? It means basically to surround something. So if you surround, you can say they encircled the building. It doesn't mean they are under siege, but they're just around it, surrounding it, okay? So you can see the word circle, right? Right? So there's that word. So why don't we say together, encirclement. Encirclement. And this word can be a 动词. So we can say, let's say together, to encircle. To encircle. And then that word, surround. Okay, so as a result, the babies died as a result of the encirclement of the facility. Now, of course, in this case, it was a siege, but they encircled the facility. Yeah. You say mixed race child. Yeah, that's how we say it. There really is. There really isn't any other specific term for that. We just say mixed race. He's mixed race. Now, for specific mixed races, there may be specific terms. Like one that I used to hear a lot, but I don't hear it much anymore. It used to be used, and I don't know if it's actually capitalized. I will capitalize it, but we used to sometimes hear the word hammerage. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I think that's spelled correctly, but I haven't seen this word in a very long time. Basically, I'll tell you where we saw this word a lot was during Vietnam War, Yue Zhan, right? Because there are many millions of U.S. soldiers came to Asia, right? Not just Vietnam, but Taiwan and other places. And many of them met Asian women and they had kids, right? So we say Amerasian children because they're half American, half Asian. But I don't see that word used much anymore. Trying to think of, there may be other, half, mixed race where they have a specific term to describe that. But yeah, you can just say mixed race. Yeah, half-breed, we could say mixed half-breed. That's not a very common term anymore. Maybe a long time ago. To be honest, I think if you use this word today, it would be kind of negative. It's not a very nice sounding term, half-breed. But it used to be an old term we used for somebody who's half and half. Mixed race, mixed blood, I guess you could say. But there's a term I like that it's a term many people do not know. Some people know it in America, but it's a Hawaiian term from Hawaii. And they say someone is hapa. Hapa. And hapa just means half and half or half. So if you say he's hapa something or hapa, it just means he's mixed. He has, or he or she has different. Because in Hawaii, many people are hapa. They're 1/4 Japanese, 1/4 Filipino, 50% Caucasian. They're all mixed up. Hapa. I like that word, and it's a neutral word. It's not negative or positive. So yeah. I grew up. My mother grew up telling me that I was. I'll teach you another Hawaiian word. If you go to Hawaii, you'll hear this word a lot. Haole. Haole is another word for Caucasian. Bipedal, right? So my mother used to say, you're hapa haole, right? Because my father is Caucasian. He's white. He's haole, and she is Chinese American. Right? So I'm hapa haole. So yeah, it's a Hawaiian term. If there's no hapa, yeah, it's a Hawaiian word. Yeah. So it's not a word you'll hear very often, but I know some Americans, especially especially in Hawaii, but if you're from maybe West Coast, like California, you might know this word because it's a word that's come out of Hawaii. So yeah, haole gets used in a very way. Sometimes haole gets used in a normal way, but sometimes when Hawaiians say haole, it has a slightly negative idea too, because a lot of native Hawaiian people, they're not real happy with all the people, tourists, guang-guang-ku, or people who move to Hawaii from other places. So if someone says, "Oh, he's just a haole," sometimes it has a negative sound to it. But yeah, it's a funny word. What was I thinking? Haole. It's kind of like I learned recently that I was talking to my friend in Japan, and she said, because sometimes overseas we hear the word gaijin a lot, right? And gaijin means, foreigner in Japan, waigore. But she said gaijin is a kind of a negative word sometimes in Japan when they say, "Oh, he's a gaijin." Outsider. Now they said when foreigners, waigore, and inside Japan use gaijin between themselves, it's okay. It's like they're almost like joking. But the better term would be 该口古今, right? Which means 外国人, right? So 该口古今 is okay, but 该今 has a slightly negative, sometimes, not always, but sometimes it has a slightly negative feeling. So I think howdy is the same way. It depends how you use the word, right? Like I had somebody ask me this recently. They said, how do foreigners feel about the term 老外? You know, do they like that term? Is it good or bad? And I said, well, it depends how it's used, right? It's one of those words that someone could use it in a slight, yeah, it's neutral, but it kind of means how you use it. Yeah, exactly. So it's sometimes words are neutral, but it's who is saying it and how they say it, you know, that it can be different. Yeah. Okay, so it says here, oh, sorry, I haven't looked at this yet. It said, before entering the hospital, our forces were confronted by. Now, we've talked about the word confrontation. It means like you face somebody, right? Or you are faced by something. So here you're confronted by what? Explosive devices. Now, this could be a bomb. It could be some makeshift. You know, we use the word makeshift. So if you say a makeshift bomb, it means it's a bomb that you create on your own, like homemade. Actually, that's another good word for makeshift, is homemade, right? A homemade tent, a makeshift tent, a homemade bomb, a makeshift bomb. We could use it in that way. Okay, so, and terrorist squad. Squad, of course, means a group of soldiers. Fighting ensued. Okay, so I think we've learned this word before, but what does to ensue mean? What? Yeah, it means, it followed. After this, something else ensued. Okay, so you could say, after their argument, a fight ensued after their argument. It means it followed their argument, you know. So something that follows something else, okay. So fighting ensued. It means after they confronted these groups, then there was fighting afterwards, or fighting followed this, in which, during the fighting, terrorists were killed. So let's say that word together, ensued. Ensued. Okay, so let's read these two paragraphs together. Gaza officials say that many patients, including 3 newborn babies, had died in recent days as a result of Israel's encirclement Okay, let's say it again. Israel's encirclement of the facility. Before entering the hospital, our forces were confronted by explosive devices and terrorist squads. Fighting ensued in which terrorists were killed. The Israel Defense Forces said. Okay, so it says here, we can confirm that incubators, baby food, and medical supplies brought by IDF tanks from Israel have successfully reached the Shifa hospital. Our medical teams and Arabic-speaking soldiers are on the ground to ensure that these supplies reach those in need, the IDF said. Okay, so I think we talked about this once before. What is an incubator? Babies. Yeah, I heard someone say 保温 something, but it's warm. It's like, you're right. It's a box that keeps babies warm, right? So it's an incubator. Now, incubate can be a way of, we can use this word to grow something, right? For example, like sometimes scientists are trying to create a virus, right? A bindu or of some kind, and they incubate it in a dish or something. They actually grow it. Yeah. So we say to incubate something, but of course here incubators like this, like you said, 保温箱. So it's a place that you put a baby, especially a premature baby, which means it was born early, right? Premature, Premature, premature. Okay, so premature baby, we can use the incubator. So why don't we say together, incubators. Incubators. Okay, so baby food and medical supplies brought by IDF tanks from Israel have successfully reached the hospital. Our medical teams and Arabic-speaking soldiers. Arabic, of course, is the language of most Alaboran, right? Arab speaks, we say Arabic, okay? So they're on the ground to make sure that these supplies reach those in need, okay? Okay, so let's read this. We can confirm that incubators, baby food and medical supplies brought by IDF tanks from Israel have successfully reached the Shifa hospital. Our medical teams and Arabic-speaking soldiers let's say it again, Arabic-speaking soldiers are on the ground to ensure that these supplies reach those in need. The IDF said. Okay. Okay. Okay, this is a tough, yeah. They speak Hebrew. Yeah. It's their own language, and they have their own writing. Hebrew. No, Yiddish is very interesting. Yiddish is this is a very interesting language. So Yiddish is it also is associated with the Jews, Yod Hiren, but it's a language. I don't know the exact history, but it came up. It was created, because the Jews have lived in many countries. I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe Yiddish came up in Europe. The Jews who were living in Europe, and they it's a mixture of different languages, and they're. The reason I think Yiddish is very interesting is because there are so many words and expressions in English that we use in America that come from Yiddish. They're Yiddish expressions, boy, if you go online and you look up Yiddish English words, there are just dozens and dozens of these words that we use every day that are actually Yiddish. Well, I think maybe, I don't know, bagel, maybe bagel is a Yiddish word, but I'm trying to think of some. Kosher is not, kosher is just a general term. Yeah, I'll have to think of some good Yiddish words later. But it is a very interesting language. But no, this is not the official language of Israel. Hebrew. And Hebrew is also just a general 形容词 for old Jewish, like we talk about Hebrew literature or Hebrew scholars or Hebrew. So anyhow, it's a good word. Why don't we say together Hebrew, Yiddish. Yeah. But it's so many words. If you start thinking about it and you think, wait a minute, where did that word come from? You realize it's a Yiddish word. In Israel, I think they use Hebrew. Although, many Israelis speak perfect English, right? I think they all learn English, or they immigrated to Israel from the United States or some other country. It's interesting because I think you know this, but the biggest, one might say that actually the biggest Jewish nation is not Israel, it's the United States. There's more Jews living in, I think there's more Jews living in New York City than there are in Israel, just New York City. So yeah, the U.S. is definitely the biggest Jewish nation when it comes to the number of Jews. So yeah. It's been very interesting because, and if you read the news recently, there's been some pro-Palestinian protests in American universities. And it's been very interesting because a lot of big business, wealthy business people have cut their money or donations to these universities. Because why? Because they're Jewish, or they come from they're Jewish Americans. And they say, no, we will not support that. So no more money for Harvard University or Yale University or MIT or whatever. They just cut it because they say, this is not right. Okay. So anyhow, I think it's funny. I haven't heard many people say this, but I do think that you can sympathize with the Palestinian people without being pro-Hamas, right? I think there needs to be kind of a line there, right? Because Hamas, well, you kind of see what they've been doing and what they did on October 7th. But, I think it's okay to be sympathetic with the Palestinian people. They've had difficult, but to say, if you cross that line and say, well, we're pro-Hamas, well, then that's a different story. So anyhow, in my mind, that's my opinion, of course. Okay, so here it says, Ahmed El, well, I don't know how to pronounce it, Mohalati, okay. A surgeon said by telephone yesterday morning that staff were in hiding as the fighting unfolded around the hospital overnight. Now, okay, let's read these two paragraphs. Sound of what he described as continuous shooting from the tanks could be heard in the background as he spoke. This is a good word that we use every day, but I don't know if we've ever talked about. If we say something unfolded, what does that mean? Yeah, it means it, but not started as much as developed. It continued to develop. It's something that's starting to. So you know what unfold, right? If you have a blanket or a mianbei or something and you fold it up, right? And then you unfold it, right? You unclose a piece of clothing. So if you say a situation is unfolding, it means it is beginning to develop. It's developing. It's happening. But usually it's at the, like you said, at the start. But it's not just the beginning. It's developing from there. Okay. Does everyone understand that idea? Like you can say an unfolding situation. What is the, it's things are still happening. It's still going on. Okay. So you can say the fighting unfolded. It started, but then continued around the hospital overnight. Okay. Let's say we're together. Unfolded. Unfolded. Okay. So he said the sound of what he described as continuous shooting. Of course, what's another word for continuous? Very simple word. Non-stop. Yes, non-stop. Continuous. It just keeps going. Okay. So why don't we say together? Continuous. Continuous. Non-stop. Non-stop. Okay. Okay, so let's try reading his name. Ahmed El Mohalati. A surgeon said by telephone yesterday morning that staff were in hiding as the fighting unfolded around the hospital overnight. The sound of what he described as continuous shooting from the tanks could be heard in the background as he spoke. Okay. Okay, so I see we're out of time, so we're going to have to wrap it up here. But anyhow, any final questions about anything? Okay. Well, good. Well, we'll see you on December 7th, right? I think that's the next time, right? Okay. Yeah. Does everybody know what December 7th is? In America, most of us know what December 7th is. What is it? Does anyone know? This is a good trivia question. I think only Americans would remember this, but when you talk to maybe not younger Americans, but when you talk to slightly older Americans, they all know December 7th. Pearl Harbor Day. it's Zhenzhugang, the day. And Americans still recognize that day. It's Pearl Harbor. It's the day the Japanese attacked Zhenzhugang, so they call that Pearl Harbor Day. So anyhow, so I'll see you on Pearl Harbor Day. So yeah.